What's up, guys? So if you haven't watched it already, I highly recommend watching the in-file language video. It's a lot more detailed and comprehensive on understanding Maci's language. Because once you understand Maci's language, then you'll be able to understand what I'm about to unpack, which is using the language within strings. Now, I'm not going to go over everything because, again, the in-file language video goes over it in pretty good detail. But I will just simply demonstrate some examples of how to use the language within a string. Let's say if you wanted to prepare data, like maci data within a string, for example, and then you wanted to dump it out to a file, that's pretty much, one use case you might want to do this for. So here I have our main.py file. We're going to start writing some simple Python code, literally within a string. And I'll probably show inline string and, of course, multiline string just to kind of show what you can do in different ways. So let's just simply write a variable, call it string, and we're going to first start with an inline. We'll just do single quotes. And I want you to kind of picture or imagine this being written in a file. If we go back to our test.save file, which is our kind of, fake game save file, we have each line with its data, but with each line of data, it begins on a new line. So you can imagine there's like an invisible new line character in between each line, for some of you folks out there who know exactly what I'm talking about, I'm just trying to explain this for those who don't. But you just need to keep that in mind when you're trying to create the data. Any other serialized data, you would see this if you're trying to preserve the serialized data, like JSON or YAML. So let's go ahead and keep that in mind. So how would you write this? I'm going to use some basic names. I'll just call it like data or something. Actually, let me go ahead and use some of the same ones. So let's just use like 3 of them. So we'll just use username, starting score, and money. And we're going to go ahead and drag this over to the right, just so we can kind of see it side by side. And so here's our string in the Python file. You can tell which file we're in VS Code just by the tabs there. So, okay. So let's go ahead and create our comment, for example. Well, I guess we'll go ahead and copy that as well. So if we wanted to create our comment, we would do something like this. This would be the very beginning of the string, right? So game... Got the space there, game save data. Right, now if we want to go to the new line, right, you would just do a \n in Python. And so now we wouldn't do a space, right, because we're literally beginning on a new line. So we want to make sure we stay right after that character there. And we're going to go ahead and type username. And then we'll do a space, and we'll do equals single quotes. And I guess in this case, we're probably gonna have to use double quotes unless you wanted to escape them. It's totally up to you. But just to keep it simple, I'm gonna go ahead and switch to using, in fact, just to kind of keep one-to-one, I'll just use double quotes all the way through for the whole data. That way you can just kind of follow along one-to-one here. So we'll go ahead and do, what is it, Johnny 88. And then right after that piece of data, we're going to do a new line character again. And we'll do starting score, equals 100, which is our integer. We're going to do another new line character. And then we're going to just do money. Whoops. Money. And this has the special glyph, locking glyph. So we'll do L equals, 1,000, which is our floating point value. And we're going to go ahead and stop right there. So hopefully you can kind of imagine so far exactly what we've done. But basically we have our comment, and then on the next line we have username equals our string data, and then on the next line we have starting score equals 100, which is our integer. And then on the next line we have money, and then locking glyph, equals $1,000 in this example. And that's our floating point value. So this is how you would express it in a string. However, we'll go ahead and now write a multi-line string, but this is how you would do it inline. Not really hard. You just need to keep in mind of the new line syntax. Now, if you accidentally forget to do it and you do something like this will be invalid because there's a space You know, just kind of like in Python, it's white space strict. So you need to ensure that you don't have a space when you're starting your variable there. In fact, I think if you were to do that now in Python, it throws a complaint, as you can see, unexpected indentation, because it's assuming you're indenting. So you definitely want to make sure you don't accidentally do that. Same thing applies in maci. But let's go ahead and convert this to a multi-line string, because it'll be a lot easier. We'll just use double, triple quotes. So let's move this down. I'm going to show you a quick trick as well if you've never seen it before in Python. So now we're using multi-line string, and you don't need to supply the new line characters, because anytime you go over the next line in a multi-line string, it automatically adds the new line characters. So we can go ahead and express this a lot more visually comprehensible, writing it like this. You know, a lot more, you know, I would say visibly legible to the human eye to understand it like this. So you can totally write it like this. Now, there's going to be a new line character that starts on the top, unless you escape the new line character. There's an invisible new line character. So this is a quick trick I like to use when writing multi-line strings, is just to escape the new line, the starting new line character. And so if you actually dump your data to a file like that, it'll start at the top now, you know, escaping the first new line character. So pretty useful trick, but that's another way to write it. I think that's a lot simpler. In fact, that's how I do it all the time. I'll create, anytime I'm creating like dedicated data that needs to be prepared, I'll go ahead and write it like this. So let's say, you know, let's say in your code you have like a name, you know, let's just use the same example. But let's just say you want to prep data, you know, let's say you're prepping your game save data before it actually gets dumped, for example. And you don't have to write it this way. There's many ways to use the maci data, but I'm just showing an example using the strings here. And let's go ahead and do like name. And so you can imagine, maybe guess what I'm doing is an F string in Python. So, you know, if we were to change this to like, you know, maybe like final save data, and you have all your variables. Of course, you can place all these values with the actual variable names in your code, but the final game save data will be equal to this, but this is your structured format now, right? And so whatever this name is going to be rendered here, and then, you know, when you write your dump function, you can totally dump the data. And of course, maci has built-in dump mechanics as well. Again, that'll be shown in another video. But this is just another quick example of what you could do. If you didn't know you can do F strings with multi-line strings, you totally can. It does make it extremely useful. I do this a lot in templating, so I'll have a massive, literally like a dedicated function or file with a massive multi-line string that is filled with just all these variables, but we have these hard-coded values, or hard-coded names, and then, of course, these values get updated by the variables throughout the code. But it's nice because you have a pre-constructed template of your data, whether it has the default data or, you know, updated data. It's always going to be able to, it's always going to be structured in the way you'd like. So that's just another example, but that's pretty much it. That's how you can write maci data. Again, watch the in-file language video, because that's going to go over it more in depth and give you a much better understanding of the language. But that's going to go ahead and conclude this video. Hopefully this was helpful to you, and take care.